Have you ever spent your whole life caring for others only to wonder, who will take care of you? We grow up believing that in old age our children will be there for us, that our sacrifices will be repaid with love and support. But what if I told you that's not always the case? What if relying on your family could be the very thing that makes your final years lonelier than you ever imagined? Today we'll uncover a shocking truth, one that many people refuse to accept. A truth that a woman named Marion learned the hard way. She believed, like most of us, that family was her safety net. But in the end, it wasn't. Her story will challenge everything you think you know about aging, happiness, and independence. And by the time we reach the end of this video, you might just see your own future in a completely different light. Before we dive in, tell me, what do you believe is the key to a happy old age? Comment below. Let's begin. Marion's story is not unique, but it is shocking. For over 40 years, she dedicated herself to her family. She was the kind of mother who never put herself first, always making sacrifices, always putting her children's needs before her own. When they were little, she stayed up late sewing their clothes, cooking their favorite meals, and making sure they never went without. When they grew older, she worked extra hours to help pay for their education. And when they had families of their own, she continued to be there, babysitting grandkids, sending money whenever they needed it, and never once asking for anything in return. She believed that love was about giving. But when she turned 68, everything changed. Her body wasn't as strong as it used to be. Climbing stairs left her breathless. Her back ached from years of bending, lifting, and working without rest. And for the first time in her life, she needed help. Just a little. A ride to the doctor's office, someone to pick up groceries, a shoulder to lean on when she felt exhausted. She assumed her children would be there for her. After all, she had given them everything. But when she reached out, the answers were always the same. Mom, I'm really busy with work. Maybe next week. We'd love to help, but the kids have so many activities. Why don't you hire someone? You have savings, don't you? Marion's heart sank. For the first time, she felt something she never expected: abandonment. She had spent decades believing that family was the greatest investment a person could make. But now, as she sat alone in a quiet house, she began to wonder, was she wrong? That's when she made a decision that shocked everyone. Instead of waiting for someone to save her, she decided to save herself. At 69, she sold the house she had lived in for 35 years. The house where she had raised her children, cooked 1,000 meals, and cried herself to sleep on nights when life felt unbearable. She took the money and made a bold, unexpected move. She bought a small apartment in a new city far away from her children. Her daughters were stunned. Mom, why are you doing this? We love you. We just have busy lives. But Marion simply smiled and said, I finally understand. I gave you everything I had and I don't regret it. But now it's time for me to live for myself. And so she started over. She joined a community center, made new friends, and started learning something she had always dreamed of: painting. Every morning she woke up excited about her day, something she hadn't felt in decades. Instead of waiting for a call from her children, she made her own plans. Instead of wondering if anyone cared, she built a life where she didn't need to ask. And then, the unexpected happened. After months of silence, her daughter finally called. But this time she sounded different. Mom, I miss you. It turned out that Marion's decision to step away made her children realize something powerful. They had taken her for granted. They had assumed she would always be there, always available, always willing to put herself last. But when she chose herself, they finally saw her as more than just mom. They saw her as a person. Marion didn't abandon her family. She just stopped waiting for them. And in doing so, she found something she never expected: respect. What do you think? Should parents always expect their children to take care of them? Or is Marion's story proof that relying too much on family can leave you disappointed? Comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And now let's dive deeper. What are the 3 things Marion discovered that completely changed how she viewed aging? The answers might surprise you. Let's find out. When Marion left her old life behind, she didn't just move to a new place. She stepped into a new mindset. For the first time in decades, she stopped asking, "Who will take care of me?" and instead asked, How can I take care of myself? And that's when she realized the first shocking truth about aging. For years, Marion had believed that no matter what happened, her children would always be there. She had sacrificed everything for them, and in her heart, she trusted that when the time came, they would return the favor. But the truth? Love doesn't lift you out of bed when your knees give out. Affection doesn't lower your blood pressure. And memories don't stop your bones from weakening. If you don't take care of your health, no amount of family support can replace it. Marion learned this the hard way. When she first moved into her new apartment, she felt free, but also vulnerable. Her back pain was getting worse, and she noticed small things she used to take for granted became exhausting. Grocery shopping left her breathless. Climbing stairs felt impossible some days. And then one afternoon, she nearly fainted in her living room. That's when fear set in. She sat on the couch, her heart pounding, and a terrifying thought crossed her mind. What if something happens to me here? What if I fall? Will anyone come? At that moment, she thought of her old friend Angela. Angela was only 72 when she had a minor stroke. Her family rushed in. Her sons flew in from different states, her daughters rearranged their schedules. They were there for her, just as she had always dreamed. For 2 weeks. Then life resumed. The children had jobs. They had their own kids. And Angela? She was left alone in a house she could barely move around in. She had spent her life pouring into her family, but when she needed them most, she realized they had lives of their own. Marion couldn't let that be her future. So she made a decision that shocked everyone. She used part of her savings, not for her kids, not for future medical bills, but for herself. She hired a personal trainer, not because she wanted to look young, but because she wanted to stay independent. At 70 years old, she started lifting weights. The first time she walked into the gym, she felt completely out of place. The room was filled with younger people, all moving confidently, lifting weights, running on treadmills. Marion almost turned around and left. But then she remembered something her late husband once told her. Strength isn't about being the biggest. It's about being the one who refuses to give up. So she stayed. The first few weeks were brutal. Her muscles ached, her back screamed in protest, and she wondered if she had made a mistake. But she kept going. One day at a time, one small improvement at a time. And the results? Shocking. Within 6 months, her back pain was nearly gone. She no longer needed help carrying groceries. She could walk longer, stand taller, and move without wincing. She felt stronger than she had in years. And the best part? She didn't have to ask her kids for help anymore, because she didn't need it. At first, Marion's children thought she was being selfish. They saw her moving on, enjoying life, and instead of feeling happy for her, they felt guilty. Her youngest daughter, Sarah, even called her one evening and said, "Mom, do you even miss us?" Marion laughed. Not because she didn't love them, but because she realized something ironic. For years she had feared being abandoned. But now that she was thriving, it was her kids who were afraid of losing her. They needed her more than she needed them. One day, Marion received a text from her son, Tom. It was short, simple. "Hey Mom, when are you free for dinner? We miss you." She smiled. For the first time in her life, she felt like she had something her children respected. Not just love, but boundaries. And that was the moment she understood something that changed her life forever. Your children should never be your retirement plan. What do you think? Is Marion right? Should aging parents stop expecting their kids to take care of them? Or is family responsibility something we should never abandon? Drop a comment below. I want to hear your thoughts. And now let's move on to the second truth about aging, one that's even harder to accept. Because if you think family is your biggest safety net, you're in for a surprise. Marion had spent most of her life believing that family was everything. She thought that as long as she was there for her children, they would be there for her. But after experiencing the cold reality of aging alone, she discovered a second truth, one that was even harder to accept. Friendships matter more than family in old age. At first, this idea seemed ridiculous to her. How could friendships possibly replace the deep, lifelong bond she had with her children? But over time, she realized that while family loves you, they are not always present. Her daughter Sarah would call once every few weeks, check in, and then rush off the phone because she was so busy. Her son Tom promised to visit but always had something come up. Marion wasn't angry. She understood that they had their own lives, just like she had when she was younger. But understanding didn't make the loneliness any less painful. One afternoon, as she sat alone in her apartment, she received an unexpected phone call. It was from Elaine, a woman she had met in her apartment complex. "We're heading out for lunch," Elaine said. "Want to come?" Marion hesitated. She had never been the type to make new friends easily. But something in her told her to say yes. That simple yes changed everything. Over the next few months, Marion found herself spending more and more time with her new group of friends. They were all around her age, all dealing with the same fears and struggles, aches and pains, grown children who barely called, and the occasional fear of being forgotten. But together they laughed, they supported each other, and most importantly, they showed up. And that's when it hit her. Family may love you, but friends are the ones who are actually there when you need them. One evening, she got sick with a terrible flu. She didn't want to bother her children, so she suffered through it alone, until Elaine knocked on her door with a warm bowl of soup. "I figured you hadn't eaten," Elaine said, setting the tray down. Marion felt a lump in her throat. Her own children hadn't even noticed she wasn't answering their calls, but Elaine had. That's when Marion realized the harsh truth. Friendships in old age aren't just nice to have. They're necessary for survival. But the real plot twist came later. One day, Marion's son Tom called her out of the blue. "Mom," he said, "I just got an invite for a work event. The topic is building stronger communities for seniors. They want to know how retirees can stay happier as they age. Do you have any advice?" Marion smiled, realizing how ironic the moment was. The same son who barely made time for her was now asking for wisdom on how to help aging parents stay happy. "Tell them this," she said. "If they want to know the secret to a fulfilling old age, it's simple. Make friends your priority." There was silence on the other end of the phone. Tom finally sighed. "So you're saying you don't really need us, huh?" Marion laughed softly. "Oh, I love you more than anything. But do I need you? No. And that's a good thing, Tom." That moment changed everything. Her children stopped feeling guilty for not being around as much. Instead of checking in out of obligation, they started calling simply because they wanted to. And Marion? She stopped waiting for their attention and started focusing on the people who were actually part of her daily life. A year later, when Marion's birthday came around, her children were shocked when they arrived at her apartment. Instead of a quiet evening with just family, Marion had a full house, dozens of friends, neighbors, and people she had met through her volunteer work. Laughter filled the air, the table was full of food, and Marion? She was glowing. Sarah pulled her aside and whispered, "Mom, I had no idea you had so many people in your life." Marion just smiled. "Neither did I. But it turns out I was never as alone as I thought. I just needed to open my heart to new people." That was the second great truth Marion learned about aging. You cannot rely on your children to be your entire world. Make friends, build relationships, and surround yourself with people who choose to be there, not out of obligation but out of love. And now, let me ask you, do you think Marion made the right choice? Or should family always come first, no matter what? Let me know in the comments. But before you decide, there's one more truth about aging that we need to talk about. And this one might be the most shocking of all. Marion had already learned two of the biggest truths about growing older: that health matters more than family and that friendships are often more reliable than children. But there was one more lesson waiting for her. One that would change everything she thought she knew about happiness. It happened on an ordinary afternoon. She had just returned from a lunch outing with her friends when she noticed an envelope sitting on her kitchen table. It was a wedding invitation from her grandson. At first, her heart swelled with joy. But then she read the details. The wedding was across the country, and the note inside said, "We understand if you can't make it, Grandma. We know traveling is hard at your age." Marion sat down, staring at the words. For years, she had believed that family was her greatest achievement, that no matter what, they would always want her there. But now, she was being politely excluded from one of the biggest days of her grandson's life, not out of malice, but out of assumption. They had already decided for her. And that's when she realized the third and final truth about aging. Society tells you that once you hit a certain age, you should slow down, that you're no longer as capable, that you should be careful, that your best years are behind you. But here's the real secret. None of that is true unless you believe it. Marion felt a strange mix of emotions, hurt, frustration, and then determination. She wasn't about to let her own family treat her like some fragile old woman who couldn't handle a plane ride. So she made a decision that shocked everyone. She didn't just RSVP yes to the wedding. She booked a solo trip, not just for the wedding but for an entire month of travel. She had always wanted to see the Grand Canyon, visit the jazz clubs in New Orleans, and walk along the beaches of California. So why not now? When she told her children, they were stunned. "Mom, are you sure you can handle all that?" Sarah asked. Marion just smiled. "I can handle more than you think." And she proved it. At 71 years old, she packed her bags, boarded a plane alone, and set off on an adventure. She took photos standing at the edge of the Grand Canyon, listening to the wind rush past her like a whisper from time itself. She danced in a New Orleans jazz club, her laughter blending with the music. And when she finally arrived at the wedding, she didn't just show up, she stole the show. Her grandson, seeing her walk confidently into the reception, his eyes widened in shock. "Grandma, you made it?" he said, pulling her into a hug. She grinned. "Of course I did. Did you really think I was just going to sit at home and miss this?" The truth hit him like a lightning bolt. His grandmother wasn't old. She wasn't fragile. She wasn't some delicate figure who needed to be understood or excused from life. She was still living. And that's when Marion understood the final lesson. If you let people define your limits, you will shrink to fit them. But if you refuse to be sidelined, you can keep living fully, no matter how old you are. The wedding was a turning point. Her children saw her differently. Her friends were inspired. And Marion? She realized she was finally truly free. A few months after her big trip, Marion noticed something strange. Her phone rang more often. Her children started visiting more frequently. Her grandson, the one who almost left her off the guest list, now called her just to talk. What? Because Marion had become something rare, a parent who didn't need them, but was still someone they wanted around. She hadn't begged for their attention. She hadn't guilt-tripped them into spending time with her. She had simply gone out and built a life so interesting that they wanted to be a part of it. That's the final secret of aging that no one talks about. The more you chase after your family, the less they feel the need to be there. But the moment you start living fully for yourself, they come back, not out of obligation, but because they're curious about the amazing life you've built. So now, let me ask you, what do you think? Should older people accept the idea that they should slow down? Or should they do what Marion did and prove that life doesn't have an expiration date? Comment below, I want to hear your thoughts. And now, let's wrap this up with the most powerful takeaway from Marion's journey. Because if there's one thing she learned that could change your life today, it's this. Marion's story isn't just about aging, it's about freedom. For years, she believed what so many of us are taught to believe. That family will always take care of you. That your children will be your safety net. That growing old means slowing down, stepping aside, and letting life shrink around you. But in the end, she realized something completely different. Her health was her real wealth. Her friends were her greatest support. And most importantly, her independence wasn't just a choice, it was a necessity. The moment she stopped waiting for her children's attention, the moment she stopped needing them, they came back not out of obligation, but because they were genuinely drawn to the person she had become. And maybe that's the biggest twist of all. When you stop chasing people, they come to you. When you stop depending on others, you gain more respect. And when you start living for yourself, your world expands instead of shrinks. So now I want to ask you, what do you believe? Do you think parents should expect their children to take care of them? Or do you agree with Marion that true happiness comes from building a life where you don't have to rely on anyone? Comment below, I want to hear your thoughts. And if this story made you think, if it challenged something you once believed, then do me a favor, hit the like button. Share this video with someone who might need to hear this message today. Because here's the truth, aging is not the end of the road, it's just a new beginning. If you want to keep learning about how to live a fulfilling life at any age, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.